conversations as students examined issues of gender bias, equity, and another big goal was to encourage them to have rich discussions and to envision their own answers to the question, what will the future of gender equity look like? My role as director of the Research and Learning Center involved connecting with researchers from various universities across the Metroplex and guiding them as they conducted their active research studies in the museum, actually with museum guests. So, for example, a Baylor kinesiologist brought a small indoor putting green to the museum and engaged museum guests as participants in his research study on visual perception and movement. That was a very popular study that we had. People enjoyed participating in that. Another study was a TCU psychology professor investigated children's attention and biomarkers. Dr. Mike Yang, who was a former learning technology student, examined creativity in virtual reality. So he brought his VR devices to the museum and engaged museum guests to gather data. Dr. Lynn from the Learning Technologies Department was one of our first and actually our most prolific researchers with her studies on multitasking and listening environments. Back to my role, two of the studies that I conducted myself in the RLC involved teenagers, and one of them examined teenagers' relationships with their smartphones, and the other was looking at their technology. But as after doing this, the museum came to me and asked me, we want to apply for a Smithsonian funded opportunity with teenagers. This was an Earth Optimism event, and this was actually last year. The goal of this event was for participating teenagers to choose one of the UN Sustainable Goals, select a problem they saw in the world, and turn it into a simple and actionable solution. And then they would create a video related to that. Some of the highlights of the meeting we did through that were to have them work with a professional filmmaker, and they had training on script writing. And then I kind of turned them on their own and said, you put your action plan together, get your video. I was there to guide them, but I was still amazed when I saw the videos. The students did an incredible job on this. In fact, one of them was a finalist in the international competition, and another of them received a prestigious Smithsonian internship after her work on the project. So when the Fort Worth Museum considered applying for the second Smithsonian funded opportunity, the National Youth Summit on Gender Equity, they contacted me again, and I agreed to direct the event. The Smithsonian provided some amazing resources. They had educator toolkits, guidebooks for each student participant, and they had a national webinar that they recorded so we could use it at a later time. I connected with Dr. Janine Gailey, who is a TCU sociology professor, and we worked with about 30 TCU students on the project. For our part of the regional summit, we focused on the impact of race, ethnicity, and class on gender equity. And the webinar they provided featured panelists ranging from well-known community activists to Olympian skateboarders. So what we did was to play a section of the webinar, and then we would stop and engage students in our own conversations about the question that was specifically addressed in that section. We did this after each question, and then after the final question, students worked in groups to identify areas for supporting future action that they will undertake in their community. And we emphasized that it was important they step beyond their university community. They need to step out into the broader community to take the future action. I really felt like this was a very important piece after the summit, because just attending the summit and learning and discussing does not necessarily translate into action unless you have a plan. So many of the students, as they worked in small groups to come up with action plans, wrote survey questions. They had the idea we need to assess community needs, find out what's going on out there, and then we'll have a better idea of developing our plan. So most of them are still in process of developing their action plans, but we felt like our regional youth summit was very productive, and the students have great visions for the future, and they're taking good steps towards actually creating a more equitable future for gender equity.